Hello, I'm Lawrence Owen, and this is Sportscaster News. Now, Khalil Mack says that he's motivated after having a disappointing season last year. When talking, with Ted Monachino, he says motivation is not an issue with Khalil, never has been. But what I'll tell you is that he has approached this season with something to prove. And that's something we all can be encouraged by. That's something that's exciting when a player of his caliber approaches his work the way he has approached it in the past. Now, last year, Mack had 8.5 sacks, 14 quarterback hits. Those are the lowest numbers of those two types since his rookie season. And the defensive coordinator, Chuck Pagano, said that he has a bit of a part in that because it was his responsibility to put him in better positions to do a better job at getting at the quarterback. The Bears also, this last offseason, added Robert Quinn, spending buku bucks, 5 years, $70 million bucks. And he's moving from a 4-3 to a 3-4. He says everybody thinks Quinn can just rush the passer, but he's a relentless, he's tough, he's athletic, he's physical, Pagano said. He'll play really good against the run. There's some things that he'll have to adapt to, from a schematic standpoint. But he's done a great job at this point with just picking up the playbook stuff. Obviously, he hasn't really had a whole lot of time to practice actual in-person physical moves with the team because, the COVID-19 situation. But he's been given the playbook, and he's able to just go through mental reps. Now, a lot of people want to say, well, Mack had a bad offseason, and he did, as opposed to his previous seasons, but he's not the only linebacker in the NFL that has had off seasons for pass rush specialists, right? not even a little bit. I mean, Clay Matthews only had 8.5 sacks to go with him, right? I mean, where was, hold on, Von Miller, 8 sacks. Wow. That's kind of low. To go with Khalil Mack's 8.5. You got to remember, though, you're going to see these kind of numbers, high sack numbers, only from outside linebackers that are in a 3-4. A 4-3 linebacker is a complete different set of linebackers than a 3-4. Because on a 4-3, a defense is basically rushing the passer with just those down linemen. Your 2 defensive ends and your 2 defensive tackles. Whereas when you're in a 3-4, one of your outside linebackers is always rushing the passer. Nearly always. Whether it be your left outside or your right outside. One of those guys is rushing the passer at all times. So it's really difficult to kind of quantify who's the best linebackers in the NFL. Especially when you're establishing linebackers, the difference between a 4-3 and a 3-4. I mean, even your middle linebackers are very, very good, but they generally don't pass rush. They're basically your captains, your coaches on the field. They're the guys who are there to read the offense and make sure that your defense is then set in a position. They support in the run and, drop back into pass coverage. They're almost never blitzing your middle linebackers. Your Sam linebacker on a 3-4 also, he's that guy on the right side, the right outside on a 4-3. Almost never rushes the passer. He's there to help your right defensive end set that edge against the run. try to help keep the running backs from getting to the outside. Almost always. Your will linebacker, however, if there is a blitz, that's where your will linebacker generally comes in. Your will and your middles are your blitzers on a 4-3. So it's really hard to kind of compare 4-3 with 3-4, right? I mean, dear Lord, you got outside linebackers that are known for rushing the passer. You know, Shaquille Barrett, TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, Chandler Jones, Khalil Mack, Clay Matthews, Von Miller, those kind of guys. Those are your guys, your Jamie Collins. Those are your guys who are your outside linebackers, generally in a 3-4, who are rushing the passer all the time. So you might ask, well, how do you quantify linebackers as a whole on who would go to the Pro Bowl or All Pro? You're still here? Awesome! Thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, please smash that like button and hit subscribe. That way, you're known when I come up with a new video here on YouTube. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. I plan on going live starting this Saturday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Conversations, man. You want to know what we're going to have that conversations for? Right down here where it says Twitter. Type that into your web browser. Give me a follow. Everything that I talk about, anything that I am getting ready to post, any kind of video that I'm getting ready to stream or upload, you'll find out when I type that right out there on Twitter, man. Don't forget sportscaster.com. That's my actual job. That's where I work, right? I am Sportscaster NFL News. Me, Joe Nubo, Ray Rout, we discuss all sorts of stuff NFL news related every day. So don't forget, I appreciate you watching me here, but you can get a lot more information in these little links here. Don't forget, check out the description below, because at the very bottom of that description is where you can support my channel and help ensure that my content continues to be uploaded and broadcasted to you so that you know exactly what's going on in the NFL. Now let's get back to the video. Well, that's a good question, because generally your pass rush guys don't have near the tackles or the pass defense numbers that your 3-4 guys or your middle linebackers have in a 3-4. I mean, look at this. Okay, so Shaquille Barrett, for instance, had an outstanding season. Outstanding season. 19.5 sacks. 6 forced fumbles. 6. Now, I'm going to put money that just about every one of those forced fumbles was against a quarterback being strip sacks. But he had an interception, 2 passes defensed, 45 tackles, and 11 assisted tackles. Go to another outside pass rushing linebacker, Von Miller, 34 tackles, 12 assisted tackles, 8 sacks. He had 2 passes defense, no interceptions, no forced fumbles. Mack had, like I already said, 8.5 sacks, 4 passes defensed. He had 5 forced fumbles. Like I said, those forced fumbles are most likely strip sacks. No interceptions. He had 25 tackles, 12 assists. How can you tell the difference between a 4-3 and a 3-4 you're going to see a lot more passes defense, interceptions, and tackles and assists from your will linebacker in a 4-3 and your middle linebacker in a 4-3. Let's go to those numbers, shall we? So let's look at Jordan Hicks from Arizona. Well, there's a linebacker who only had 1.5 sacks. He had, however, 9 passes defense, 2 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries, 79 solo tackles, 92. Ooh, I just messed that all up. I'm sorry. I just read Corey Littleton. Again, another guy. Okay. Jordan Hicks' numbers, was 6 passes defensed, 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery, with 92 tackles and 57 assists. Corey Littleton, the guy I just named off that had 9 passes defensed, 2 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries, he had 79 tackles and 56 assists. Those are the kind of guys that you're looking at going, wow, those are some numbers, right? Bobby Wagner, Blake Martinez, Fred Werner, Jalen Smith. Those are guaranteed 4-3 linebackers. That's why they have high tackle numbers, good passes defense, and they usually have an interception or 2. So, how would you quantify it? You would you kind of have to go into the fantasy ratings, wouldn't you? The fantasy ratings kind of absorb everything that a linebacker does. They take their tackles, their assisted tackles, sacks, passes defense, interceptions, fumble recoveries, and forced fumbles all together, quantify them into a point total, and there you have something. So, who led the fantasy points at linebacker last year? Well, your top 10, Bobby Wagner was 10th. That's right, Bobby Wagner. Now, he was actually tied for 9th. There were 3 people tied for 9th. Blake Martinez, Bobby Wagner, Devin White. All at 9.3. TJ Watt was 8th at 9.5. Corey Littleton had 9.6. Jordan Hicks, 9.7. You notice these numbers are very, very tight together, right? 9.8 for Joe Schobert for Cleveland. Very, very tight together. Here's where a little jump happens from 9.8 to 10.2. Shaquille Barrett. That happens when you have 19.5 sacks. 10.4 goes to Chandler Jones. He had 19 sacks, but he had more passes defense, forced fumbles than what Shaquille Barrett had. Now, C.J. Mosley's on this list at 10.8, but he only played 2 games. He had a good 2 games with 2 passes. In 2 games, he had 2 passes defense, an interception, a fumble recovery, and 4 tackles, 5 assists in 2 games. At 10.8, and he was at number 2, but we can't really count him because he only played 2 games. Let's jump to the number 1. Now remember those numbers where you were seeing him go from 9.3 to 9.5, 9.6, 9.7, 9.8, all the way up to 10.8, and the biggest jump in between there was 0.4 fantasy points. The number 1 guy on here, the jump went from 10.8 to 12.3. That's right. 1.5 full points. That's nearly 4 times the jump from a position to position on the fantasy line. Who could have a 1.5 jump in the fantasy line? You might be asking yourself. That'd be my boy, the Indianapolis Colts will linebacker, who didn't even make All-Pro last year, Darius Leonard. He had 71 tackles. I mean, he was solid, clean across the board. 71 solo tackles in 13 games, mind you. He didn't play a full season like most of these guys did. 13 games because he had a concussion in like week 2 or 3 and missed some big games like Kansas City, which the Colts still won, but he missed 3 games and had 71 solo tackles and 50 assisted tackles. On top of that, he had 5 sacks, 7 passes defensed, 5, you got it right, led the league at linebacker with 5 interceptions and 2 forced fumbles. 12.3. That's unbelievable. He had more total points than anyone else in the league. And the next closest had 15 games. And then 16 games. Holy crap. That's outstanding. So that's how that is one way you can quantify linebackers in the NFL and kind of compare them on whether or not, even if you are, looking at completely different positions, whether it be, your 4-3 linebackers, which is middle linebacker, will linebacker, which plays on the left side if you're facing the defense, and the Sam linebacker, which plays on the right side if you're facing that defense. Or the 3-4, which you have 2 outside linebackers who are generally pass rushers, and 2 middle linebackers who are generally your run support and your pass defense, who step back and try to jump in the passing lanes and cover people. Darius Leonard had an outstanding season. He's young, 2 years into the league. Arguably, by this, what I'm talking about here, the best overall linebacker in the NFL. If you quantify all defensive stats together into one specific, how good are you? And until next time, I'm Lawrence Owen for Sportscaster News, and as usual, I want you to have a good one.
Just because a player's not a household name doesn't mean we can't make him a household name.